for the Susan Taylor Podcast, where we discuss the yoga of mind, medicine, and healing. Author of Feeling Good Matters, Sexual Radiance, and the Vital Energy Program, Dr. Taylor imparts authentic knowledge and practical tools that inspire, educate, and empower us to be a healing force for positive change. So join us and take your life and our planet to the next level.
Hello and welcome to episode 40, Does Exercise Build a Resilient Brain? With so much fear and wonder around cognitive decline and some of the responses I got from our podcast on cognitive decline, I thought in today's podcast I'd look at our brain on stress, exercise, and endorphins with neurotransmitters, as well as some research highlights on the exercise benefits for building a resilient brain. So let's get started. Resilience decline is happening now worldwide, and I say this because our lifestyle habits are contributing to this. It's contributing to stress and anxiety, which actually decreases the functionality of the brain itself, in addition, of course, to the body. The brain, as we know, is our chief controller, and it has to be nourished and protected in order to become resilient or be resilient. As we know, our brain is plastic. That means it has the ability to adapt and grow new connections based on what it's exposed to. So if we expose it to things that are very nourishing and beneficial, it's going to grow and adapt to that situation as opposed to things that may not be as useful. If we look at worldwide, the population is moving away from nature. We know that because of technology. We're living in what I call digital living. Our relationships are now with metal devices, and they're no longer with life forms, whether it be plants, animals, or even a rock would give you more interaction than a computer or a gadget. This has sparked an intense increase in stress-related diseases in the form of we're seeing more anxiety, fear, insecurity, and overall lack of resilience. Exercise, or shall I say movement, is one simple yet effective strategy that helps us maintain some sort of balance and build resilience, especially when it comes to our brain. In 2017, there was a meta-review in the Frontiers in Neurology, and it spoke about, and it did the review on the neuroprotective effect of exercise, and it supports our views actually on lifestyle and exercise prescriptions that we're seeing now. You know, you go into to visit your primary care, they're going to suggest lifestyle and exercise prescriptions to most of their patients, and how these are important and needed to maintain health and wellness. You know, activities such as aerobic exercise, cycling, resistance training, tai chi, yoga, and others, you know, based on their effect upon the brain. This study shed light on this, the meta-analysis, how beneficial it is to the health of our brain. Nothing was really mentioned, of course, on the psychological approach to these activities. For example, as I'm always pushing, everyone needs to be focused, have focused awareness, because if we have consciousness or we're very aware of what we're doing when we're performing the activity, mainly if we're focusing our awareness on our breath, we're going to get even a more profound benefit. And you could just imagine the benefits. And of course, certain people, everyone has their different benchmark and what they're aware of with relation to their breath and how they're performing the movement or exercise pattern. So then how does exercise affect our brain even if we're not doing it with full focused awareness, which is okay? But let's first take a look at the concept of stress. Stress is always the main component here. Remember, stress is a perceived threat, so it puts us into that fearful situation. Let's keep in mind that the neurobiological concept of resilience can't be narrowed down to a single neurochemical, hormone, or even peptide for that matter, but rather it's a result of the interaction of multiple chemical elements working in concert throughout the complex networks within our brain itself. We'll first turn a look at the HPA axis and resilience. We know that the brain establishes a two-way communication as part of a feedback loop between itself, the immune system, the cardiovascular system, by way of the endocrine and neural mechanisms, and that's your HPA axis, during the stress response. By examining how humans and animals adapt to highly aversive environments like combat or childhood trauma, research has recently pinpointed specific neural, neurochemical, genetic, and even epigenetic components, remember what's in our environment, that may characterize different levels of vulnerability or resilience based on how an individual responds to bad stress. It's actually been shown that a measured physiological response to environmental stressors is an evolutionary advantage as a function of an acute stress response. More commonly, we talk about our acute stress response as a fight or flight mechanism. However, if you face stress, and this is the key here, and you don't have recovery accompanied by, adequate homeostatic response, we don't come back into balance, in other words, the initial response could ultimately result in harmful after effects. So what we're saying here is that when we have those, the environmental stressors that we've had throughout our evolution, what happens is we start becoming more resilient. However, if we don't recover with a balanced approach, we come back into homeostasis, which that's what we're always continually wanting to do. The body automatically does that. Then that's where the problem lies. So how does exercise then help with building a stress-resilient brain? Overall, we know that the benefits of exercise and movement are indisputable, whether you're concerned about or in the midst of stress, cognitive decline, anxiety, depression. Any exercise or movement, for that matter, may be beneficial. And as I mentioned, if we take it one step further, regulating the breath while engaging in the movement will take the benefits even further. This podcast isn't really about regulating the breath, but it's just to give those of you out there that have done some trainings with me know that we really emphasize breath. We know that just getting up and moving with exercise can help stimulate parts of your brain that aren't as responsive when you're lounging around and possibly feeling depressed. It also promotes the release of the feel-good brain chemicals, namely endorphins, and it may also help you focus on your breath, actually, again, which frees you from the worries and improves your confidence. Most people that do exercise, I know when I was training in endurance, even running, I used to always focus on the breath. But, I'm sure that other people do that too, especially athletes that are very well seasoned. How does this happen? Well, let's turn to the endorphins and other neurotransmitters, how we get that freeing from our worries and our confidence gets built with exercise. And if we look at endorphins and neurotransmitters, that may be on the biological level, the secret to that, not on the subtle or pranic level that we talk about in meditation and yoga science. The first thing any runner knows is the runner's high, and I can attest to that. I used to be, a long time ago, in my younger days, I used to really enjoy doing long runs. The runner's high describes the release of endorphins that your brain experiences when you physically exert yourself. Endorphins are a type of neurotransmitter or chemical messenger, and they help relieve pain and stress and help your brain stay in what I call the resilient zone. Endorphins are only one of many neurotransmitters, and they're released when we exercise. By the way, I've also heard, I remember going in when I was getting acupuncture once, we were talking about shopping, and people that go on their shopping spree actually get that high with endorphins. It's almost like an opioid release from their retail therapy. But the problem with that is you don't walk around malls anymore. You just do one button on the computer and you get your instant gratification. Let me just get back on track now, but I always thought that was funny. We get our endorphins or opioid release when we're doing shopping. That's because our mind becomes so focused, actually. Anyway, back on track. Physical activity also stimulates the release of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. These brain chemicals do play an important part in regulating our mood, which, of course, is a barometer of how resilient we are. For example, we could say regular exercise positively impacts our serotonin levels in our brain. That's why if we're ever feeling melancholy and we might have a little dysthymia, it's much better to make ourselves get up and move, because raising your levels of serotonin boosts your mood and overall sense of well-being. It also can help improve your appetite and sleep cycles, and they're often negatively affected by stress. And so we could say that it actually builds resilience. Regular exercise also helps balance your body's level of stress hormones such as adrenaline. Adrenaline plays a crucial role in your fight and flight response, but too much of it can damage your health, weaken your mind's clarity, and actually it shrinks a part of your brain. Parts of the brain. Whenever we're under stress, it'll shrink some of the cellular tissue there, and it'll also affect your ability to not be affected what's around you. In other words, you just shut down. If we look at some of the studies on exercise in the brain supporting the resilience factor, resilience zone, and what we're talking about here, here's some facts. Exercise does increase the volume of the hippocampus. Anytime you have stress that's really chronic, and I've told you this on a past podcast, the hippocampus will shrink. And that's what happens when we start getting forgetful, when we're under a lot of stress. And that slows the age-related brain atrophy down. So that's what happens when we're under stress. But exercise increases the volume of the hippocampus, which is great. So it helps us counteract the chronic stress that we may experience. And it also helps with the progression. We know that age-related brain atrophy deals to the progression of mild cognitive impairment. An example of that is Alzheimer's disease. So exercise has been shown to increase brain volume, which may be a plus. Exercise also increases the volume of gray and white matter in the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain. In addition to these physical changes, studies have shown seniors who are consistently engaged in some form of physical activity were better able to maintain their cognitive function, focused attention, and even memory compared to a sedentary peer that they may have. Exercise also changes chemical signaling in the brain, even if it's short term. A study from the British Journal of Sports Medicine showed that cyclists had a 20% increase in brain-derived neurotropic factor, and that's a key protein in neuroplasticity, and a 14% increase in vascular endothelial growth factor. These are key to neurogenesis. Okay, that's real important. So it suggests that different types of exercise may be useful in building brain's resilience. Overall, the benefits of exercise are indisputable. In addition, we can say exercise may contribute to navigate adversity and fortify a resilient disposition. And I'm going out next week to work with a resilience training with the Navy, and that's why resilience has been on my mind for quite a while, studying and getting the research to back it. Resilience is a wonderful, wonderful capacity and quality to have within ourselves. And if anyone's concerned or in the midst of cognitive decline, exercise and movement with consciously being aware of our breath, I'm going to add that in there, may be very, very beneficial. So give it some thought. Get yourself on a systematic training of movement. It could be anything, just getting the body movement, getting, as we say, if we're doing Tai Chi, getting the Chi moving. If we're doing yoga, getting the pranic field moving. And if we're just doing Western exercise, just getting the blood flowing. Either way, we're getting something to move, and it's actually feeding our brain, bringing more oxygen, nutrients to the brain. And for those that want to look a little deeper, it's actually bringing more of a pranic force to the brain for increasing capacity and the brain's resilience. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. And if you'd like to be notified weekly for new podcasts, please subscribe. The Susan Taylor Podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And also, susantaylor.org, where you can just click on the podcast to subscribe. Again, if you have any questions or concerns or any feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Just write in and we'll include it in one of our podcasts. Until next time, remain calm, consciously aware, living in the moment.